For me, this man is one of the heroes that has done so much in this field. And he inspires me. Remember when I said it's not about information, it's about inspiration? This is where I get my inspiration. I think everybody knows Dr. Stephen Greer's background. You know, emergency room doctor, did the Disclosure Project, did the film Sirius, does CE5 for you people that are from other countries, Close Encounters 5 with calling down the beings and so forth. He'll explain his latest projects, but please help me welcome Dr. Stephen Greer.
I love you. You're awesome.
I love you too.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Paula. And thank all of you for coming. And to all the people, several thousand people around the world on the webinar, thank you for joining us this afternoon in Laughlin, Nevada. Hooray. Well, I really want to make a comment about Paula. And we got some feedback on the mic. Got it? It's ringing. All right. Paula has been really a bedrock of what we have done with the Disclosure Project and this work since the 90s when she hosted me in Italy. And she was living there, working as a teacher at the American School, and helped introduce the Disclosure Project to people like Max Poggi, a senior captain with Alitalia Airlines, and others, people at the Vatican like Monsignor Balducci, and many other people. And Paula goes back longer than I do in this field, and she has been someone that has such enormous integrity and has been such a dear friend that's why I'm here today. Really, it's all for you, Paula. You're an angel. God bless you. So, thank you. Now, the focus of my presentation today is not going to be focused on Disclosure Project and all of that. I'll do some updates towards the end for you because there's a huge amount going on. I do want to thank all those of you who contributed to the full-length motion feature film coming out called Unacknowledged, and it's about the Unacknowledged Special Access Project. Is going to be the most explosive expose in history on this subject. And those of you who've contributed, we're now the second most supported crowd-funded documentary in history globally. So thank you all for that. And many of you have, and I appreciate it very much. That film will be finished, we hope, in about a month and probably be released in late February till April 2017 time frame is what we're looking at. It's being revamped a little bit with who the new president-elect is. Versus the one that many people thought, but we're on track for completion in about 30 days for that film. So it's been quite an adventure from announcement in April to December to put together a full-length feature film spanning literally 75 years of covert programs and their evolution. And it's going to cover what's been kept secret, how it's been kept secret, and why. And the last part, the why, is the opus. That's the pièce de résistance. That's what's going to really blow people's minds when they hear that. Now, a lot of that I'm going to deal with tomorrow. I plan so that when this conference is over at UNLV in Las Vegas, I'm going to be doing an expose on false flag operations and how they have infiltrated the consciousness of humanity, what that agenda is, what technologies have been used, and what's being fast-tracked over the last 12 months and looking forward over the next few months. So those of you who want to attend in person, you may. If you're part of this conference, I'm now addressing the people in this room, you can attend for half off the tuition because we'll continue at the student rate because you're all students, right? So if you want to come, see, my folks will be outside that right door on the left. There'll be a table and you can see them afterwards. To the people who aren't really familiar with my work, I really want this to be less about information than it is about heart and spirit today, which is, I think, the theme of this conference, consciousness. And those of you, I just am curious, how many people have read Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge? I'm just curious. So a few people. And I want to share some of the information from that, because I know increasingly people don't read. And boob tube rules. So I meant YouTube. But, well, no, I meant boob tube. But the point I'm making is that most people don't read anymore, and so I'm going to share a few things to sort of set the stage of how I got to be standing here before you. I'm an emergency physician, and long before I ever dreamt of being a doctor, I was a child who had contact with these interstellar civilizations. And I was about 8, 9 years of age, and there was a craft in a bright blue sky like today here, beautiful, in North Carolina, and seamless, sort of saucer, slightly domed disc. And I saw it, connected to it, and I knew at that moment they were people from other planets. Now, of course, my parents discounted it, thought it was just a kid that had seen something and made it up. But the boys and I in the neighborhood who saw it, it left an indelible impression. And I became, I don't want to use the word obsessed, focused like a laser on looking into this as a little boy, 8, 9, 10 years of age. And in fact, in my closet in my house, up to about this high from the floor, were stacks and stacks of old Argosy and Life and other magazines that used to have UFO pictures and accounts from the 60s in them. Remember? Those of you old enough? I'm dating myself badly, aren't I? Yeah. So, but you know, as I became an adolescent, I sort of had that fall away. But in the spring of 1973, I had a singular event happen in my life, which I found out isn't uncommon for people who have ongoing contact with these interstellar civilizations. And being kind of a jock kid who thought he was indestructible, you know, teenage boys think nothing will ever happen to them. Well, I had injured my left thigh, and then I bicycled 200 miles in one day. Yeah, long bike ride, and I got it really infected. So I know now as a doctor I had really bad sepsis and infection. And then I bicycled 200 miles back from the beach with this. And I was very poor when I was raised, and I had my own little apartment in high school. So I'm 17 years old, have my own little apartment, washing dishes at a Red Lobster to support myself. And I'm just there so sick. And I suddenly, just one night, I leave, and I'm gone. And I died. But I didn't die. I went on into the worlds of light. But it was a beautiful, non-frightening experience, but strange, because I was raised a very devout atheist. I mean, my parents were like serious atheists. So, and if you couldn't put it in a test tube, it didn't exist, full stop, period. So I thought to myself, wow, there really is divine consciousness and cosmic awareness. And so I went into this state because I was very pure-hearted about it. I was this 17-year-old boy. I didn't have any preconceptions of religion, you know, with an angry man sitting there punishing you for everything you hadn't done perfectly in your life, or all the catechisms of Orthodox religion, because I just wasn't raised with that. So I'd always had this deep love for space and the stars and sort of dreaming. And so I went out into space in my body of light. And there I had amazing experiences with 2 points of consciousness that were divine avatar beings, way past celestial. And it lasted a long time. And it was something that was shocking to me, but beautiful at the same time. So I just let it all flow through me and accepted it. So my own personal awareness, my individuality, became this crystalline thing through which the unbounded consciousness of the great mind was just shining. And I began to realize that my individuality and that could go back and forth as one. and then it became one. Beautiful. Who's had that experience here? How many people have had a near-death and that kind of experience? There's a number of people. It's not unusual with people who've had ongoing contact. Now, the way this ended was I was basically didn't want to come back to Earth because I'd really had a really miserable childhood, to be honest with you. I have a friend who was, when I was a resident in medicine, medical resident, who said, you know, Dr. Greer, your problem, because we call each other doctor, that's just joking. You know, Dr. Greer, your problem is you think you're a normal person screwing up, when in reality, you're a screwed up person doing very well. And I thought, no truer words were ever spoken. And so, you know, here I am, this kid, and so these divine beings, there were two of them. Both were like universal avatar essences of consciousness. And I said, well, you want me to come with you, or should I go back to Earth? And they said, well, we want you to go back. And I went, oh. And I said, I had enough presence of mind to say, thy will be done, sort of thing. So I said, okay. So with that, I sort of came back, and I awakened in my body. Now, at that point, I had your classic paralysis where I couldn't move. I said, oh, great. Now I'm back in this shell of a body. I've just left this beautiful divine realm of consciousness and light, and I'm stuck as a paralyzed 17-year-old. But I couldn't move my body. I couldn't move a hand. I couldn't move anything. But my eyes were open. But I could hear. I could see. My senses were there, but I couldn't move. I went, oh, boy, am I in trouble now? I'm living by myself in this little studio apartment, $75 a month, including utilities. It was a dump. Anyway. So here we are. So I'm in this state, and then all of a sudden something comes beside me, and it's a test, and it's a being that I could sense came beside me, and was sort of pulling me out of my body, and I had to see if I had enough will to stay, that I had the will to live. That part was a little freaky. I have to say I was a little bit, because basically what that being was there for is say, do you have the will to stay here and do what you're supposed to do here? So I was there in that state, and it went back and forth, out of my body, in my body, 4 or 5 times. I don't know how many times. And finally, I said, yes, I'm going to stay here, because that's what I was told Spirit wanted me to do. So I stayed. And then I began to be able to move and walk and got up. And all this, the infection I had, now I still have a hole in my leg right here, sort of a big indented area where I lost a lot of this thigh muscle. But I was healed. I never saw a doctor. And the reason I had not gone to see one is that I had no insurance and I was poor. And so I just didn't go see one. You know, at $1.60 an hour, it's tough to go see a doctor, which is what the minimum wage was back then. So I thought to myself, well, you know, what do I do now? So I sort of filed that away. That was in March of '73. A couple months later, I learned of a program for meditation where you could begin to experience cosmic consciousness in a meditative state. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. So I took my mother. I said, why don't we go to this? So I took my mother, and she couldn't afford it either, but I got a student rate, so I took the course and started studying all these sort of concepts of higher states of consciousness, the Vedas. You know, the Vedas, the ancient writings from India, predate Hinduism, by the way. I began to study from every culture in the world, native cultures, ancient Christian, you name it, the concepts of spirit and consciousness. And so I learned some meditation techniques and went on this path of exploring consciousness as a 17-year-old. In fact, well, let me correct that. It was on my 18th birthday that I learned this to do mantra Vedic meditation. And it's a kind of a funny story, because later I became a meditation teacher before I was a medical doctor. In my misspent youth, when everyone else was running around drunk and chasing skirts, I was in an ashram meditating 8 hours a day. So I went to this instruction course, and it was one-on-one. And I sat down to meditate, and I was there with the mantra, and I went very deep and very quiet, and then I transcended into the unbounded mind, just pure mind. It's pure consciousness, not defined by space, time, thoughts, or ego. It's just pure consciousness. Beautiful. And after this, about 20 minutes, the meditation ended, and my instructor looked at me and said, "You transcended into cosmic consciousness, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, isn't that what we were supposed to do?" I didn't understand that you were supposed to make a big geschrei about this. And make a big deal and, be on a bed of nails or something for 40 years. So I'm very irreverent, you'll find. Anyway, but I'm going, all that stuff. So I said, well, yeah, and that's what we're supposed to do. You just connect to the mind whereby you're conscious and transcend. So he says, yeah, but most people, I said, well, that was great. So I began to practice that. 4 months later, in October '73, I'm up on a mountain in North Carolina. And so I've carried this near-death experience with me into my first year of college. And so I'm absorbed totally in wanting to be in the mountains of North Carolina, where it's peaceful and pure energy, away from humans as much as possible, and just be in consciousness and the purity of Gaia, the purity of the earth spirit. And my grandmother was Cherokee Indian, so I have this deep connection to earth. And I was up on this mountain called Rich's Mountain outside a little town called Boone, North Carolina, named after Daniel Boone. And I was up on this mountain, way at about 5,200 feet, I think it is, at the base of what they call a fartar. Now, you would say fire tower, but they say a fartar. So I went, this is North Carolina. So I'm up at the fartar, and so at the base of the fartar was a place to sit on some rocks. And so I got there just before sunset, and I saw this beautiful, the sun was just going down, and there was this beautiful disc, an E.T. craft that materialized. Boop. And it was exactly the one I saw when I was 8 or 9, and they were back. So I just sort of acknowledged them, oh, you're back, how beautiful. So I just sat and meditated. So I went into this deep meditation. And at the conclusion of the meditation, which I thought was 20, 30 minutes, it turned out it was much longer, deeper. I just went into this transcendental state of pure, quiet mind. At the end of it, I opened my eyes, and as I did, I stood up and looked, and you could see the whole Milky Way galaxy from horizon to horizon up at that altitude, crystal clear. Quite chilly up at that altitude that time of year. And I had a ski jacket on, and a beautiful thought, actually it was a thought sent into me from beyond that said, "Behold, what a beautiful universe God has made." Bang, at that instant, those words, I went right back to the near death. And beautiful. But I wasn't dead, I was in my body. So I'm walking around, and it's beautiful. So I think, wow, I'm having this near-death experience, but I still have this. So I thought, wow, this is how life ought to be on earth. Well, very emotional. Just at that moment, this little guy, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, comes over and is about this tall, touches me on my right shoulder. So I'm wearing a ski jacket. It's kind of puffy, you know how they are. And I see the jacket indent like this, and my shoulder's touched. And when I'm touched, there's an electromagnetic static discharge that builds around me. And all of my hair stood on end. And I had hair then. I mean, I had kind of long hair. And it went, unlike now, but it went, whoop. And my arm hair was all standing on end. And with that, I dematerialized onto that ship for, I'm saying 3 to 4 hours, because I wasn't returned to the top of the mountain until midnight or so. And I was in this state of consciousness on this spacecraft with multiple civilizations co-creating what we now call the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind protocols, the techniques for making contact using consciousness. Now, it was a very strange experience because people say, what did you talk about? It wasn't like, hey, come over, we're going to have some bagels and lox and, and chat about who ran for president and other bullshit, frankly. It was very much being in that state of consciousness with them, in a sort of where information was conveyed in nonverbal packets of knowing. Does that make sense? Knowing, pre-verbal, not monkey chatter. Not this, not what we're doing right now, but the essence of knowledge that's pre-verbal. That's deep communication. So as this was going forward, I began to realize that the only reason they were interested in me was that I'd had that experience and embraced it and understood that consciousness, this unbounded, pure field of awareness that's within every single person, moreover, within every single thing, is the key, the Rosetta Stone to interstellar contact and communication. It is the science of the next millennium. So that's what we want to talk about today. So that's kind of my introduction. And I know it's a little bit of a personal story, but I mean, I want to make this real. It's very real for me why I'm still doing this. A lot of people say, what causes a medical doctor to leave his medical career to do something like this? That is enough to make you leave your medical career. Because in 1990, I was revisited by these civilizations when I was working as a doctor, and they said, pick up that which you have dropped. Those are the exact words that were spoken to me in my bedroom in North Carolina next to the Biltmore Castle, Biltmore House, where I used to live in Biltmore Forest. And I thought to myself, okay, now it's time. I was wondering what would happen between 1973 and 1990. So all that I was living with doing this, I was keeping it to myself and a few close friends. And then I was kind of told, now it's time to share this information and connect some dots for people on this issue. And so in 1990, I started the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and CSETI. And I began to just speak of the concepts of using consciousness and non-locality of mind and coherent thought to make contact with these civilizations within the construct, ethical construct of universal peace. That's what we really want to talk about, because there are retrograde interests that are trying to drag us into endless war. And it is already time that we establish on this planet and on others universal peace. Now, the foundation of universal peace is not going to be intellectual only, or ethical, or philosophical. It's going to be in the experience of the singularity of oneness of consciousness that all intelligent life is emanating from. And if we experience that state of consciousness and understand what we are experiencing, then there are no aliens. There are only other intelligent beings in the cosmos. Very important. That's why I never use the A word. It's like the N-word or all these. No, I don't. I think it's a horrific word to use because it means foreign, other, alien. And I think that we need to begin to not think about that in that way. We need to think about these civilizations as people, like you and I are. And some are more advanced, obviously, if they're interstellar. They're going to be very different from you and me in many ways. But within each of those beings is the light of the universal being, the cosmic self, the unbounded being. And so when we look into the eyes of each other, and we look into the eyes of these civilizations, we need to see not aliens and otherness, but oneness. And if we see that we are all one within that field of pure consciousness, no, we will not be afraid. We will not have wars, because if you are to engage in war, you're going to have to hate someone other than yourself. I love the story of Mahatma Gandhi. Everybody know who he was, the guy who founded modern India. And when he was shot, and I know people who were with him, back in the 90s, I met some of the women who were in his support team there at the time this happened. They came to a CSETI event on the beach in Florida in the early 90s. You want to hear how that happened? These three women had separated for decades since Gandhi was shot in the 40s and had not been in touch for 40-some years. They were very young girls. They were like 18, 19, one German and Dutch. And they all the same night had a dream with Gandhi in it, and they were in a lucid precognitive dream. And they were told to find me and to come together to do a meditation on a beach for universal peace. Well, when Gandhi was shot, you know the first thing he did? He didn't scream out, didn't he? He did this, blessed the person that shot him, and forgave him and fell. You know that story? That's what happened. We have to find a way to forgive, to see oneness and love and divinity within ourselves. And if we don't, we're going to go to the scrap heap of history and have to restart on this planet. So it really is a critical fact that we are at the point where the consciousness of division and the consciousness of alienism, let's call it alienism. There's racism, misogyny, homophobia, all that. But alienism is so toxic, and it's the opposite of what we need to be understanding about this issue. So the way that we go beyond alienism into this understanding that can result in universal peace on Earth and amongst other planets is to understand what the foundation of that future peace will be. And that's the understanding of this field of consciousness where we are all one people. So why the motto for CSETI is one universe, one people. Doesn't matter where we've come from. So that it's a very simple concept, but the experience of it is very deep and profound. And it's based in the meditative experience of consciousness and going into the transcendent field that is the home where we all meet together. It's the circle of all life, where every individual form the drop become the ocean. And when the drop becomes the ocean and the drop again, back and forth, you begin to realize that the drop is the ocean. The essence of what's in the ocean and what's in the drop, being you individually, is one. It's a singularity. It's like Ernst Schrödinger, one of the fathers of modern quantum mechanics, particle waves theory in 1908, said that the total number of minds in the universe is one. That is, it's a singularity. So we all think it's my mind and my body and neurophysiology and hers and his and hers. No, that's on the level of your individual ego. But there is the aspect of just pure consciousness, the ability to be aware of awareness, that state. The early Christians called it the beatific state. You can call it cosmic consciousness. You can call it many things. but the oneness. That experience will be the foundation for universal peace. And these young women who had been with Gandhi, of course, knew that from the Vedic teachings of ancient Sanskrit in India. And when they came out onto the beach in Florida, as we were walking, were walking ahead of me, a beautiful blue, this color, blue sphere orb about this big, like one of those spheres in the CSETI logo, that triangle, appeared and floated along with us for several seconds and then dematerialized. And we sat in deep meditation until well after 1 in the morning on this beach for universal peace. And that's why they came together. It's why Gandhi came in a dream and told them, come and do this. So it's so important to do. There's a power that happens when many people come together in consciousness with this understanding. And as Arjuna was told by Krishna on the battlefield, a little of this eliminates all fear. The this he was referring to is that state of pure consciousness, of cosmic awareness, and the experience of it by the individual experiencing, however briefly, and perhaps permanently at some point in your life, that the ocean and the drop are one. And understanding and experiencing that, then you don't view something from another star system or another planet or another dimension as alien. It's all one consciousness. And now, it doesn't mean they're the same. Don't conflate equality with sameness. This is a mistake that a lot of people make. There can be pure spiritual equality. Doesn't mean you're the same. I'm certainly different from anyone in this room, and everyone in this room is different from everyone else. So that's the beauty of it. There's infinite diversity within infinite oneness. And if you embrace both, it's a lot of fun. It's only when you begin to, you can't deny the diversity, and you can't deny the oneness in order to be a spirit warrior into the future, creating universal peace. So the greatest task before us, although we're working on many other projects, remember, by 1954, the year before I was born in 55, we had gravity control. We already had mastered anti-gravity systems. Free energy, 0 point, some decades before that, but fully developed in a solid state system by the 50s and 60s. We haven't needed pollution or poverty since before I was born on this planet. Now, the fact that there have been misanthropic money whores who have run amok of the freedoms of the people of the earth is a problem. So I can't ignore that problem, and that's why I founded the Disclosure Project in 1992, 93. But the chief task is what my focus today is with you, and that is establishing each of us as ambassadors to these other civilizations on the foundation of universal peace, which is pure, unbounded consciousness. Now, this has a lot of practical implications as well. For example, we have these things called smartphones. They're very dumb. No offense to Silicon Valley and to Steve Jobs, God bless you. These are really dumb because you know what they're running off of? Radio towers, radio frequencies from 1844. Like a telegraph. It's a radio frequency, 1800s. That's all. It's a fancy telephone. It's a telephone. Now it has other things, integrated circuits and silicon chips, and can do a lot of stuff. But the basic physics behind this is very 1800s, most of it. Your cars, Mercedes, 1888. Jets, 1930s. Rockets, 1940s. Wernher von Braun. Everything important that has been discovered for the last 75 to 100 years is in a black box, which has resulted in the mess the world is in today. We have to liberate those sciences and technologies. But to do that, we have to do it with the consciousness of universal peace. And that's the big caveat. Because the only thing worse than the current state of the world is to have disclosure that serves the agenda of the warmongers and the money whores who want to then move us into interplanetary and interstellar conflict by manipulating this subject, which they have been doing since the 50s. That's what tomorrow is going to be about, the entire 3 hours. How they've done it, what the technologies are, who the cosmic Manchurian candidates are, and how they've been set loose on the public. But for today, I really want to go deep into this concept that a civilization that is using technologies that go beyond the speed of light are by definition interdimensional or transdimensional. I like the word transdimensional. It's a better descriptor. And what do we mean by that? And this is where I get into it. We have to do a quick discussion of what's called cosmological discovery so that we clear up some cosmological indigestion. Now, let's take yourself as an example. You're sitting in this room in a physical body or at home. Your physical body is 3D. It's actually all energy. Within the subtle interface between the energy of your physical body is what's been called the astral body or body of light. And this is what you fly around in a lucid dream. How many people have had a dream where you're flying and you're awake within the dream? Quite a few people. How many people have had one of those dreams of something that happens in the dream and in the future that event took place? A lucid precognitive. About half this audience. That's how I met my wife, by the way, in a precognitive lucid dream. So, why not? So I think that you look at that and then think, well, then within that body of light, which is a dimensional shift and has an interface, a connection to the physical body, there is the pure thought body. It's called causal in the mystical, but the causation. And it's a resonant tone of a thought that then gives form. So this gets abstract quickly, so I don't want to lose you here. This is criticality now. Criticality is understanding causality. So if you look at what the sound aspect of a pure thought is, it's tonal. And that then gives expression in the so-called astral dimensions or light dimensions, the astral form of that tone that's a standing wave within it. Now, if you go even more subtly, you go to a state where you realize that that is pure consciousness. Consciousness forming the thought essence that forms the body of light, that forms the physical body and the whole cosmos. So all of this is folded within each other. There's no separation here. So you don't have to travel. People say, where am I going when I meditate? I said, you're going nowhere because you're already everywhere. Within you, there's a wonderful expression from the Sufi tradition. It's a rhetorical question. Thinkest thyself a puny form when within thee the universe is folded. Now, that literally is true. Within every single person. I used to talk to Edgar Mitchell. Ed Mitchell was the sixth man to walk on the moon, passed away last year, a great guy. And that basically we are all conscious quantum holograms, where we are pure consciousness, and within each of us, we have our individualities, but it is interfacing with these dimensions that are astral worlds of light, the experience you have in near death or a lucid dream, this causal existence of pure tonality and thought essence. It's a point of knowledge as opposed to an expressed visual form. And then there's the pure consciousness, whereby all of you are awake right now. Those of you who haven't fallen asleep yet, the awake mind is a singularity. Although we trap it within our egos, which is fine, we have to be aware of time and space, but we can also learn to expand it and be in touch with the unbounded part of it, even while we're walking around or driving down the freeway. That's the evolution of cosmic consciousness. We're going to get more into this later. Deep analysis of the states of consciousness and how they pertain to cosmic civilizations. Now, when you have interstellar civilizations, if they have gone from one star system to this one, by definition, they are already transdimensional or interdimensional. Because you can't go subluminally below the speed of light or at the speed of light from 1,000 light years away and get here and get home. It'd take you 2,000 years. So, and 1,000 light years is only 1% of the way through our Milky Way galaxy, which is 100,000 light years across. A light year isn't a measure of time, right? It's a measure of distance. Everybody know what a light year is? Let me tell you real quick. A light year is the distance light goes at 186,000 miles every second for a year. So every second, 186,000 miles for a year. That's the distance. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, is 100,000 light years. And we're just one little speck in space, the whole galaxy, with our 100 billion stars. So to give some perspective to this, when you're dealing with materialistic, reductionist views of the cosmos, as they say in Maine, you can't get there from here. Well, because if you're going through a straight line. Well, what happens? What happens if you create an electromagnetic field around this object and it begins to resonate in a certain harmonic, and it looks like it's dematerialized, but it's really just moved up a few octaves, let's say, into the near astral, into that dimension. Now it's weightless. It has no mass. Therefore, and it can travel, instead of from point A to B in a line, it can go from A to B, boom, right there. Non-locally. Not only non-linearly, but non-locally. So non-locality begins to be the buzzword, the order of the day. And the ultimate non-local field, that, in other words, a field that is not limited by linear space-time, is consciousness. So any civilization that has gotten from one star system to this one has mastered trans-dimensional physics, which means that their technologies are interfacing not only with space-time matter, because they have spacecraft, they have bodies, but they also have technologies that are interfacing with thought, consciousness, astral forms, what we call dematerialized electromagnetic fields, in a non-local way. This will begin to, if you're thinking carefully about what I'm saying, it's going to explain a plethora of experiences a lot of you have had that you haven't understood. Have I lost you? Because we ain't even got started yet. It's going to get really good here in a minute. Now, that means that civilizations that are going beyond the speed of light, by definition, have technologies where their thought and consciousness interfaces with electromagnetic devices, such as communication systems, guidance systems, energy systems on the spacecraft. And that's why many people recount, if they're on a craft, they'll see these beings just touching a console and thinking, and the craft will go here and there. What's going on here? So back in 1991, I wrote a paper. I know nobody reads, but it's in my first book. You can get it on our website, SiriusDisclosure.com. And it's called UFOs and ETI, a Comprehensive Assessment. So it's the comprehensive assessment of this whole issue. It got picked up by the aerospace industry and the CIA, unfortunately, and I got a visit. But basically, a big part of that paper talks about technology-assisted consciousness and consciousness-assisting technologies. And what that means is you have a technology that augments your consciousness to remote view or see or interface with time, space, matter, material. But there are also, you have consciousness-assisted technologies where the consciousness of the pilot or the occupant of the spacecraft is assisting and guiding the technology. And they are interwoven like this. They're woven together. Now, how can that be? Well, I know this sounds like magic, but go back 200 years and show Thomas Jefferson this, and he'd say that that's magic too, maybe. Maybe he wouldn't. He was a pothead. Anyway. He did. He was. Cool guy. Anyway, so my point being, civilizations that have developed the ability to go beyond the speed of light, when you go through what I call the crossing point of light, it's like the sound barrier. You go through the sound barrier, bang, there's this big sonic boom. Well, there's a light barrier. It's called 186,000 miles per second. But you don't speed up to it the way you run down a runway in a jet and get that speed. You can be completely stationary, and through a resonant frequency shift, and it's all electronics, electromagnetic, mostly magnetic spin. Remember magnetic spin. And at that point, a solid object can look like it will disappear in front of you, but it hasn't disappeared. It's not visible to the naked eye, but it's still there. Or maybe it's not there, but it's moved off to another galaxy 2.5 million light years from here. I'm going to show you an interstellar ambassador who came to us at Joshua Tree a few years ago, who came from Andromeda, which is 2.5 million light years from our galaxy. And he clearly told us that's where he's from. His name is Bijou. We have a photo of him. Most important photograph ever taken, by the way, in the UFO era. Now, but to get your mind around that experience, you need a foundation. And this is the foundation, is understanding how something that looks like a sphere or a ball of light can be visible briefly with the naked eye, vanish, reappear, and then fully materialize into a spacecraft or a group of ETs standing out in the desert with you. This has happened to our contact teams over and over and over again, like in Joshua Tree. Now, the reason it's happened is that I train people in understanding states of consciousness, higher states of consciousness, and the physics of transdimensional technologies that are interstellar. If you don't understand ET transdimensional interstellar technologies, you will never understand how they appear and all the what look like bizarre ways that they appear in our Earth space, or in our body space, or our mind space. So beginning to understand ETs, the first step, understand yourself. If you want to understand interstellar civilizations, know yourself. Know thyself, and to thine own self be true. It's true today as ever. So you have to know who you are. Now this begs the question, who are we? You know, are we just upright chimps running around? Well, sometimes. Worse. But in reality, we have folded within us the entire universe and this field of unbounded consciousness and the ability to understand all the dimensions between infinity, unbounded mind, and this point in space, time, and matter. All of that's folded within us. How do we know? That's us. How else do you have a lucid dream and see the future, except that your consciousness isn't bound by space and time? That's folded within you. So you don't have to go anywhere. We're not going anywhere if you just go within yourself and understand who you are. Now, most people don't want to own who they are. It's easier to cop out and say, oh, I'm a blob. I'm Bob the Blob. I don't know nothing, and I'm only, you know. That's a cop out. The truth is, every single human being, by birthright, has the ability to understand this aspect of themselves spiritually in consciousness and begin to develop higher states of consciousness that are operative. Now, what do I mean by that? It means that instead of it being only, oh, well, I'm sort of intellectualizing this, you're actually using it. You're practicing the meditation technique, then you're going and remote viewing distant star systems. You're making contact with those civilizations, connecting to their communication systems and their consciousness, and you're vectoring them into Laughlin. God bless them if they come here. See what I mean? So it's something everyone can do. So now we have literally tens of thousands of people all over the world on these close encounters of the fifth kind, CE5 teams. And a close encounter of the fifth kind, for those of you who don't know, I'll define it, is when humans initiate the contact or facilitate the contact for the purpose of peaceful communication and dialogue. It's a CE5. And you can do it in a lot of different ways. People have done it. They'll see a UFO, they'll signal to it, it signals back and comes over. Now, a lot of people say, well, aren't you afraid? I said, afraid of what? If you've died already, what are you afraid of? You think the CIA is going to intimidate them? I just say, fuck you. And they will try to intimidate you, but you say, no, I'm not going to be intimidated. And no, you just say, I know who I am. You know. I think it's very important for people to understand how key that state of meditative consciousness is if you're going to be an ambassador to these people. Because we're not living in an astral heaven right now. We have a lot of people who are going to want to confuse us, intimidate us, and stop us. But you know what? They can't if you have the clarity of consciousness. And as Arjuna was told by Krishna as he was going into battle, a little of this, referring to pure cosmic consciousness, eliminates all fear. You cannot be afraid if you are in a state that is in this fearless state. And this is the concept of a Shambhala warrior, a spirit warrior. And it doesn't mean you're violent. When I use the word warrior, I mean it means that you're not able to be deterred and stopped by any temporal force on earth or elsewhere if you understand that what and who you really are. And this is really important for people to embrace, because we're going to have a lot of courageous people to make this transition from this old world that's crumbling to a new world that the hallmark of which is universal peace and interstellar travel. Because within the next few hundred years, here's a little surprise announcement. Every intelligent civilization in the cosmos will be connected to each other through a network openly. And Earth's turn is our turn to enter that realm. Now, these civilizations have been inviting us, watching us for a long time. And during primitive times, if you go back to so-called primitive societies, and I don't like that word, except you can say primitive means prime, elemental, and very pure, they had contact very openly. Native American people did, and Celtic people did, all over the world, in India. So almost anyone who understands consciousness will begin to understand that we're not alone in the cosmos, and that they can be in a deep consciousness state and being your own shaman, make contact with these civilizations and have open contact. And so that's what we're all being called to do. But now we're being called to do it not in a tribe, you know, in Nebraska, and a tribe in Ireland separated. Now we have a global civilization that is interconnected. And we're being asked to become an entire civilization that joins these other civilizations as we go forward. They have been knocking on our front door, our back door, the basement door, every door for about 60 years since we detonated, or 75 years since we detonated the first atomic bomb. Because they knew that that was the hallmark when a civilization is going to go in one of two directions. It's either going to become a level 1 civilization, as Michikaku calls it, and is living peacefully and not destroying its biosphere, or it's going to stay a level 0 civilization, which is what we are, but we're going to have these weapons of mass destruction and destroy ourselves. What they will not allow is for us to be an existential threat to other planets. And therein lies the rub. Because as we have developed these systems, certain enforcements have been put in place since the 40s to monitor our development, contain it, and limit what's happening. This has caused all kinds of stress within the national security structure of the United States and other countries, because you're dealing with people with a militaristic mindset who aren't accustomed to having their wings clipped. And because of that, it's created a lot of stress and tension. It is for that reason we have to begin to view ourselves as citizen diplomats from Earth to these other civilizations. This is a critical call. And that's the call I answered in 1990 when they said, pick up that which you have dropped, and visited me and said, go forward with this. Very difficult task. Now, within months, we were out doing this, and then in '92, we were out on a beach in Florida. I'm sure you've all seen it from the movie Sirius. How many people have seen the movie Sirius? Yeah, it went to #1 on Netflix last year for documentaries. And on our YouTube channel, you can see it for free. 1 million people have seen it for free on our YouTube channel, if you want to go there. And it's youtube.com/S-disclosure, S as in Steve, disclosure. So if you think about this, well, how many civilizations have come this way before us? A lot. You know, we've reached the point where we have to make this choice between we're going to live together peacefully amongst ourselves and these other civilizations, or we're going to run into some very big problems. And that's what we're doing. We're running into some very big problems. To that end, I'm not going to get into the Manichaean discussion of, you know, the good aliens versus the bad aliens and all the stuff that's usually talked about because it's so sophomoric. What I'm going to say is, regardless of who is out there, we, the children of Earth, have a responsibility to develop our own consciousness and understanding to be people of universal peace from this planet. And if we take care of that, the rest will be taken care of. We have to take care of that first. Now, I don't think it's a wise thing for people to get into what I call cosmic codependency, where they think that there are ETs that are going to swoop down and fix this mess for us. And there's this sort of other tendency to say, well, every problem on Earth is being caused by the aliens. There's this scapegoating that goes on because, A, it's mostly disinformation, and B, it's this tendency that humans have to not take responsibility for themselves. We have to take responsibility for ourselves and our planet. And the first way to start doing that is to develop consciousness and the understanding of consciousness so that you and all of us together become ambassadors to these other planets in peace. Understanding the technology is important because let me tell you, when you're out in a remote area, like I take people out a few times a year, we were just in Joshua Tree in September, and I'll show you some interesting images of a mothership out in space that materialized 4 or 5 nights out of the 6 we were there. And these events start happening. What you're going to find is you need to understand the science of consciousness, because these civilizations are not using smartphones. And their aircraft are not jets or even so-called alien reproduction vehicles that are just anti-gravity. They're trans-dimensional teleportation vehicles. And they're interfacing with consciousness and fields of energy that have to do with not only time and space and matter, but also with the astral realm and consciousness, causality, tonality, all of it. Many times we'll be out there in the desert and suddenly there'll be a crystalline tone begin to emerge around us, or a beeping out of an 800,000 acre park. And it's coming, and it's the carrier wave for the craft that hasn't materialized into visible form because there's a space satellite tracking, and if it materializes, they're going to shoot it. They're going to send in jets and fire at it, which has happened. So, you know, in 2 hours, we're not going to be able to go through all the things I go through in a whole week of introducing the complexities of this program. There is an app that will go through a lot of it that you can get. But I want to give you a flavor of it. So imagine you're sitting out under the stars in a circle with 20 people, 25, and you're meditating, and you're going through a guided meditation, and you go into pure consciousness, and then we begin to expand and see the area around us with our inner sight, remote viewing. And we begin to see not only the area in the desert around us, but space and distant star systems. And as each individual in the group begins to connect to a different civilization, they invite them to come into that location. And we call that coherent thought sequencing, where once we see them in remote viewing, we vector them straight in to the site and bring them in. Now, this isn't just calling them in a wishful thinking way. It's a very specific process. It's easy once you learn it. It's the first few times seems a little difficult, but when you learn it, it becomes just automatic, like when you're just learning meditation. So the ETs, the reason they're responding to that is that the group is understanding that consciousness is the key to contacting, but also seeing and hearing and understanding. Now, what can happen after that? Well, we'll sometimes often have an object that will literally light up in the center of the circle. And we've had objects just turn on and then turn off. We've had voices of ETs out of thin air just speak in the air around us or come through our electronic systems. We have magnetic field detectors, magnetometers, and radar detectors that'll be out there way far away from any man-made source, and they'll start talking. And the ETs will take over the circuitry of those detectors and begin to talk. And different detectors will talk in different tonalities in ways that the manufacturers have told us they're not supposed to do. I call it transdimensional electronic communication through the electronics. Other times we'll have craft literally materialize right above us and dematerialize. We'll have beings that will be in the desert. So I'm going to show you a number. Is this interesting? Oh, okay. So because it's the sort of thing that most people think, is this a dream when they first come? And I can tell you there's some people here a year ago had never been on one of these, and they could not believe what happens in the first 4 or 5 days. And the reason the ETs are responding is that the State Department isn't doing this. The United Nations isn't doing it. No foreign ministry in the world that I've been in touch with, and I've been in touch with most of them, are doing it. Who's doing it? You are. We are. So we're the default. The failure of the governments of the world and the ruling elites to do anything constructive besides warmonger, disinform, and nonsense has caused us to be at a state where we, the people, have to be the vanguard of contact. And you can do it with 2 or 3 people in your friendship circle or neighborhood, and you'll be astonished what happens. And it's all about understanding how these ETs are going to interface with us. And it isn't always a fully materialized craft with an ET corporeally in a body coming out and saying, how you doing? Take me to your leader. Forget all that. It's much more beautiful and much more nuanced. I think we have to begin to question why would they need to do things like that when they're able to simply materialize in a point in space and time and interface with you in consciousness, but with your whole group. Give you an example. One time we were up on Mount Shasta and we were doing this deep meditation. So the way it works is we do a deep, quiet meditation, mantra meditation. I usually start the session with a Sanskrit puja. We then go into pure unbounded mind. We then awaken and begin to expand our awareness all throughout the cosmos, remote viewing other planets and craft, whatever our heart and mind is drawn to. And as we see a spacecraft in our mind's eye, or sense one or being, we connect to them in a universal peace and love. We invite them to that spot. And then we show them. It's like zooming in from Earth from space, right to where you're located. And we do this for maybe an hour. And we were in that process. And all of a sudden we heard this tone that came from one direction. I believe it was from the southwest, and moved across our circle. And it was a tone in the air. But everyone with their eyes closed saw this pearl white sphere. Do, 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 do. And everyone had the same image in their mind. So we heard it we recorded it. We recorded that tone. We recorded the tone, but the tone is very causal. Remember what I said about causality, being pure tone, manifesting form? That tone was the carrier mechanism for the sphere, which was seen in our mind's eye, which is astral. And then later, we had an object fully three-dimensionally materialize in the sky, visible with the eyes. Does that make sense? So it goes the whole range. Now, this can happen in your bedroom. We had a couple that came to California, Borrega Springs, a very dark place where you could see stars great. And one was a police officer in New York City, the other was a firefighter, and they were married. And they had a couple kids, and they were so interested in this because of a sighting they had. And they came, and they were so pure-hearted. The first night I said, well, now when you go to bed, as you go to bed, ask the Great Spirit to open your inner sight so that as you're sleeping, you can travel in dream time, in the astral of dream, and connect to these civilizations to communicate in universal peace, and invite them to come into your room if you are ready for that. So they both did it. And about way wee hours of the morning, 3, 4 in the morning, about 4 a.m., this ET fully materialized in their bedroom. They woke up. There was a craft outside humming, partially materialized, and they were there communicating just mentally with this being at the foot of their bed for 2 hours. So it was beautiful. And these were people who were not like yogis who spent 20 years in meditation retreats. They were a police officer and a firefighter, salt of the earth, but pure-hearted. Pure-hearted. They didn't have the intellect and the junk overriding, just giving themselves to the experience. So remember that. Be pure-hearted and with pure intention. It's astonishing what can happen. So when you're in this state of meditation, and I have a whole series of meditation CDs you can get that teach the entire mantra meditation and the coherent thought sequencing. When you practice it, a lot of times you can put on headphones and many people, the first time they do it, the craft appears in their backyard in the astral form and then materializes and comes in. Many, many people. I mean, the protocol really does work, and the reason it works isn't because of anything about me. This was something that I discovered or co-created with the ETs in October of 1973, right there near the fire tower in North Carolina. And it was because I was a young boy, a young man who had no preconceived ideas. Thank God I had this happen before I became a doctor. Because, the more educated you become, the more closed-minded you are, most of the time. And I found that really all they're looking for are people who are willing to be peaceful, pure-hearted, open-minded, and without fear. And it's very easy if you're in this state of meditation. So the foundation for our entire civilization is resting on a very simple concept of peace that's in consciousness, and giving yourself to that experience. But there's a lot to understand. How do these ETs and why do they appear the way they do often, in ways that are so enigmatic? What Dr. J. Allen Hynek with Project Blue Book called high strangeness. Well, it's high strangeness to us, but a flashlight would be high strangeness to someone 1,000 years ago. And what I want you to understand is that they're dealing with sciences and technologies that are very advanced physics, but that are emanating from understanding the science of consciousness and how thought, mind, and consciousness interfaces with mind, matter, space, and time. And if you begin to comprehend that and begin to practice it, it doesn't seem mysterious anymore. It seems, this is the way it should be. And I think that we often have had people misinterpret these experiences for us because they didn't understand this, what I call ETs and the new cosmology. So in 1995, I wrote a paper called ETs and the New Cosmology. I'd invite all of you to read it. And it goes through all of this. But part of also what it goes through is the confusion that happens when people have these strange experiences and they're not distinguishing between ghosts and other dimensions and poltergeists and extraterrestrial. So a weird event happens. Is that your grandmother from the other side? Is it a shaman from 1,000 years ago? Is it interstellar ETs? And how do you tell the difference? Well, you have to have enough knowledge to have discernment to tell the difference. So what has happened in the UFO subculture is that many experiences people have had that are just unusual, they call it alien, when it's not alien at all. It may just be from another dimension. Does that make sense? Very important to understand this, because otherwise you get into a sort of a commingling and a lack of discernment that causes more confusion than elucidation. For example, many ETs will appear in a fashion that you could confuse with a spirit being from another dimension. However, if it's ET, there's a certain feeling and flavor, quality, timbre, tone to it that is distinct from a spirit being. Now, that's something you have to learn. First, you have to know there's a difference, which most people don't. Secondly, you have to know what the distinguishing hallmarks are. And as Monsignor Balducci said, remember, Paula, when he said, angels don't need flying saucers. So you could have something happening from another dimension. It could be angelic realm, celestial, spirit realm. It's not ET, but it could come into this dimension, interface with 3D space-time, to where you could think that it's ET, and it isn't. On the other hand, you can have ET events happen that are at such a refined level of consciousness, and even celestial, that you could confuse it with an angelic event, the other way. Does this make sense? You need to have discernment. And discernment, the first thing for discernment is knowledge and experience. You need to have both. I often think to myself that one of the profound ways that the public have been deliberately misled on this is by throwing all kinds of things together and mixing them up, where people don't know the difference between an angel, a demon, an ET, a this or that, and they're all called aliens. It's called alienism. And this is a big problem, because in that confusion and lack of discernment, they can drive a Mack truck of fear into our civilization to support the warmongers. And they've done it. They've been doing it through New Age communities, UFO communities for 50, 60 years, since the 1950s. And it's time for us to kind of grow up a little bit on this and appreciate the necessity of clear understanding. And if we don't, we're going to get fooled again. You know the Who, then we won't be fooled again? Well, we were fooled again. You know what they were singing about? The Vietnam War, where they hoaxed the attack on in the Gulf of Tonkin, and they basically hoaxed an attack on our ships in Vietnam, which caused Johnson to stampede with Congress into greatly expanding the Vietnam War. Then you remember that little weapons of mass destruction thingy in Iraq, which didn't exist, and they sent Colin Powell up to the UN holding vials of radioactive material and sarin gas and anthrax, a little bit of this, and they didn't have any. But of course, trillions of dollars a year later, and hundreds of thousands or a million people dead later, if you count people in the Middle East, and they're people too. So they got away with that. The big one's coming. That's what I'm talking about tomorrow afternoon. If we're fooled again. But let's not be fooled again. Let's wake up. Wake up, folks. Let's wake up and avoid that. An ounce of prevention's a pound of cure. So I want to go through a few of these. Some of you have seen these, but the event selection, I've put those on. And they did have we're going to have a clock timer here, but it's not functioning, so I have no idea how long I've been talking. But so you guys will have to, those of you yakking backstage, if you could be quiet. I know. I'm an emergency doctor, not a whatever. Okay, let's put on this. I want to show Bijou. Joshua Tree, yeah. Bijou, Joshua Tree. The first one. Bijou, Joshua Tree. It's pronounced Bijou. And Bijou. That's what he told me his name was. Now this is him, and he's about 5 feet tall, maybe a little shorter. Has what looks like a yarmulke. It's actually an electronic teleportation thing right here. He has a wharf-like concave indentation in his forehead here and here. This is his head. The nose is lit up more on this side because there was a sphere, an orb that materialized that we all saw over here that lit, and in that cone of light, oh, can you put that back? Yeah, you just pause it. It's a DVD, so you put it on and then pause it. That's great, thanks. And this happened 7 years ago, November, almost exactly this week, in fact. In Joshua Tree up here in the high desert. And he was floating, he's waving here, this is his chest, and one booty and another booty. Now, when this happened, the way this happened is very important. Moments before this happened, we were on a break, which means people had to pee and stuff. So I walked out in the east field at the geology tour site in Joshua Tree, which I highly recommend. And I was there with a group of people, and we were talking, and a sphere about this big, size of maybe a grapefruit, appeared right by my right shoulder. Again, my right shoulder. About that far away, and several people saw it. It was there and then disappeared. And I said, they're back. Okay, they're here. So we went back to the circle. We made a circle of chairs out in the desert for about 35 people or so. And we suddenly heard 4 or 5 ETs talking. Little voices. Now, everyone heard female voices. They were mostly women. I heard a couple male voices. I said, well, there's a male voice there too. So one of our team members named Raven had a 35 millimeter camera, held her breath and took a picture of the area where we heard them talking. With the naked eye, nothing was seen. On the digital camera, this guy is there and an orb with a cone of light. And that's what happened. So we then had all our electronics, our magnetometers, radar detectors, all these electronics we have started chattering. And I would ask a question, and I said, where are you? I was getting intuition. Are you from Andromeda Galaxy? Because that's what I was getting. And we would have a detector go beep, beep, yes. And then I would say, and then I got the name. Is your name Bijou? Yes. So I would go through a back and forth binary sort of yes and no with these electronics that were interfacing with this group that was around us. And they dematerialized after they initially materialized. And we then went into meditation and traveled to Andromeda Galaxy, to their world with them in consciousness. So that's how that happens. Very beautiful. Most important photograph ever taken. By the way, he's wearing sort of goggles or glasses. You see them right here? It's a little bit of a side of the glasses. But I think these are night vision type things. And he's a mouth here smiling. Has sort of black hair, a receding forehead like me, and then this weird yarmulke thing. I think yarmulkes were started because, or head garb, because people had encounters with ETs that had these teleportation electronic systems that hold them in what I call electronic astral projection. Does that make sense? Where electronically you're moved through another dimension astrally and then can materialize into another dimension. Now this is from 2.5 million light years away. All happening out in the middle of a wilderness. Beautiful. Next. Let's see the menu again. Monsieur, behind the curtain. Hello. And then, oh dear. Stand by the technical difficulties. I was just wondering if folks behind the curtain can stop talking because you're distracting my thoughts. Thank you. Well, I don't know what happened. There's no disc? It dematerialized. Now, here we are. So do event selection. I don't know what this is about. So I want to show this one. This happened a few years ago on a beach in Florida, near a town called Boca Grande, light beam. So let's look at him and then pause it. You have to probably, yeah, there you go. So this, now we were out on a beach. I know, see the eyes right here very faintly, and kind of the torso area here and legs, and it looks like a halo. I think this is where the concept of halo came from. It's actually a toroid, electromagnetic field, transdimensional, that's holding this being. Very small being, only about this tall, on the beach. And I saw it come in, shimmering, and I had a person with a really good Nikon camera, and they took a picture, and here was this I call it, this crystalline-like light beam that was on the beach. It was maybe 5 feet from us, about 5 feet. So next. I'm just trying to give you a kind of it goes from all kinds of experiences on these expeditions. So if you hit play, maybe it'll just go to the next one. There you go. Now we'll skip, let's see, the next one I want to show is just sort of a more three-dimensional event that happened here near Santa Fe, object in '92. This just gives you sort of an idea. We had a team, the CE5 team near Santa Fe, and there's this ship that comes in at about several hundred miles an hour. It's fully materialized, broad daylight, and it was another case where Ivy, the member of our team, felt the ETs, couldn't see anything with the naked eye, took a photograph, and this disc was there, and she had this amazing contact experience. This is broad daytime, by the way, with this object. And it should show sort of a close-up of it, if just let it run. If you hit play, maybe I should go back there and do it. Hit play, and let it run. There you go. See? Seamless. It's just your classic sort of domed disc type object. It was maybe about 30 feet wide, estimated, maybe going 500 miles an hour. But enough in this dimension that it was captured. Okay, next. So one of the things that we've consistently had happen, I mentioned these tones. Play the tones here at Mount Shasta. And we were up there about 11 years ago in the fall. And listen to this. It's very interesting. Turn the volume up. Now this is moving across from one direction over us to another. And while we're meditating, everyone is seeing this spherical, gunmetal, gray, white ET object floating right through the circle. And then later that night, it materialized over the volcano, Mount Shasta. Now everyone heard this, and luckily we recorded it. We didn't have a good digital recorder back then. At that point, there was just one of those tape players. And now, let's see, I want to show another fun object. I want to show this object at Mount Shasta because this sort of is a follow-on. A couple years later, we're up in Northern California near the Oregon border. Now this you may want to allow the sound.
Oh my God!
That was great.
You have to watch very carefully. Here. Comes straight up, makes a left turn. Great camera work by Todd. And he follows it. My laser is following it. This. Look what it does. It does this sort of like accordion compressing as a light ship and goes out into space. Now, it came up from the field in front of us. And we had been having this contact where we had ETs around us that were not materialized, but were in what I call the near astral form, like Bijou. and or electromagnetically moving around. And there were a whole group of ETs that were moving around us. This is great just to show more still images. This is from Joshua Tree, but it'll give you an idea. You can go ahead and let this just play. And the reason I want you to see this is to see the orb. Now, this is the actual orb that appeared. This are trees illuminated, and it illuminated the chairs with blankets on them because it was cold. And here's this guy, barely in this dimension, waving at us. And with the naked eye, this was a fraction of a second. This is just turning up the light a little bit. People say, oh, he has angel wings. I said, no, that's an electromagnetic field transdimensionally. And the orb is over here, and that's why this side of his body is illuminated more. So you have to look at this as a transdimensional electronic astral projection, but where it can move from astral partially into this dimension. Now, we've also had it happen where they fully materialized. We were at this same site once, but we were in meditation, and we had 4 ETs in their full bodies materialize at that same site. So this is Bijou. The next. Is this interesting? I mean, I wanted to give the consciousness part first and then move into this. We have several thousand of these images, and we could go on for a week with this. And it's just a beautiful thing to do. And I tell people, if the ETs are coming, why are they coming? Now, this is beautiful, this ribbon at Boca Grande. I just love this because we're in a samadhi meditation. I'm guiding people into actually God consciousness and then unity consciousness. And this comes in. Now, this is one still on a photograph. And it wraps around this Peruvian medical doctor and goes up and is centered in her third eye. Look, it's wrapped around the side of her. Now, cool, huh? Nothing retouched here. So, and of course, she was having a samadhi experience of cosmic consciousness. And the ETs came in, and she felt that they were working with trying to open up her chakras and her third eye and her energy system. And we were all in deep, quiet meditation when this happened. Very beautiful. So yeah, let's show these. This from the Outer Banks, OBX. This is where, no, the first one, Objects Over a Beach, OBX 2010. This has happened when, this was the year when the jackbooted thugs, the federal fascists, arrested me, put me on trial, convicted me as a convict, made me pay $5,000 fine for meditating on the beach for universal peace. You know the story? Oh yeah, tried to put me in prison for 3 years. Welcome to my life. All right, so, yeah. So watch this. We're on the beach at North Carolina Outer Banks, Cape Hatteras National Seashore, and look what comes in. We're in meditation. You can turn on the tone here, the sound, because there's some cool sounds. That's a highway there, a headlight coming. And there's a boat out. Look, it lights up. It's orange-red. And you heard the detector going, and it dematerializes. So, now watch this. This is, now with the naked eye, it's huge. And it just floats, it material comes in and then becomes massive. It lights up the whole ocean like an orange-red light all the way to it. And then dematerializes. Meanwhile, around our circle, we have all our electronic devices communicating, and the ETs are talking through the devices. Here we go again. Now watch this next one, is when an object is moving this way, and it makes a really sharp turn. This is not a satellite. Bam! Isn't this great fun? I always say, why don't we do this all the time? This is what's fun. And now, our experience in consciousness is that we're communicating with the occupants of the craft through remote viewing and consciousness, and we're inviting them into this dimension. And a lot of times when they appear enigmatically like this, they're just doing something to confirm that we've made contact. Because if they stay in space-time near us too far, we'll have a jet come in and fire an electromagnetic weapon. We almost had one crash at Mount Shasta from an electromagnetic weapon, almost hit it. So I'm very cautious about it. This is wonderful when I go in the crop circle in the United Kingdom. This one, go ahead to the next one. And no, object above puja table, UK 2010. There you go. And I did the puja, which is Sanskrit ceremony, not Hindu. Predates any world religion. Sanskrit is a body of philosophy of consciousness. And this weirdness appears. Now, someone had a detector on the table that was green. Nobody had a blue light. And this is the Ascended Masters, a picture of the Ascended Masters. And this beautiful tubular thing comes in and is captured on this one frame of a photograph. Beautiful experience. And this next one I love because it's daytime and we're in a crop circle, and we had one of our detectors, this one, Dr. Greer points to orb object entry. And the detector in the very center of the whirl, and all of a sudden I feel the ETs have come, and this is me pointing, this is me in a cap. My increasingly large forehead gets burned. And this object is floating right here. This is broad daylight, normal settings in the trees. Yeah. Beautiful. Stunning. And I mean stunning, these objects. And now people say, how did you see it? I said, I felt it here. I felt it. And I asked, take a picture there. There's an object almost in this dimension. And as you develop meditation and higher states of consciousness, you can see the astral, near astral energy of these beings when they're not quite in this dimension, but about to appear. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And this is this sphere. Now, if that sphere were to fully come into 3D space-time, it'd probably be a massive spacecraft with hundreds of ETs on it, is my sense. But obviously. Now, this was another wonderful one, this purple craft in the field in France. I was there teaching the Ministry of Defense and the people who work with President Sarkozy how to do this. This is the cover story. The cover story was an outing for a weekend. But that's me, and this is our team, and I'm pointing to an object that had just flashed in over by the puja table. Then this, look at this, very subtle, and everyone's turned around looking at it. It's this subtle purple flat disc that just appears over the field. Not quite in this dimension, but when it first appeared, it was bright. It was this bright flash of light. Let's see, we're running out of time, so we're going to go through. I love this one. Let's do the craft launch at Crestone, because this is a place where Paula came on her first CE5 expedition, and I think it changed her life, didn't it, Paula? Coming there in the Sangre de Cristo. So we're on my land in Crestone, and this thing comes straight up, and it's this beautiful light ship. It's a gorgeous photograph. We should do an art book with some of these. And it comes up from the earth in front of us and stops right here in one frame. It's like dusk. And it came straight up and stopped. And I want to show another one from the same spot, the same year, this golden ET ship in the field. And it was mostly in this dimension, but it had been underground in an aquifer, because there's a big aquifer water underneath that area. So golden ET ship in field Crestone 11, play that. We were there at dusk. Actually, the sun was, I think, still up. And I said, look over here. So the guy takes a photo. I said, I feel there's a ship, and it's coming up. Look, it's like liquid gold sitting right there. Not quite materialized, beautiful, broad daylight. Yeah, and we had a stream along here. They call it Magic Creek. It's the one that flows down from the stupa, the only Tibetan stupa in North America that the Dalai Lama had Ambassador Jim George of Canada, who's a very good friend of mine before he passed away, to build there. And here's a craft bursting from the sand. This is a fantastic, gives you an idea how quickly this can happen. We're there on the coast of Florida near Fort Myers. That happens. Watch this. And we're actually out there making contact like this with our hands out, welcoming them, because they had been sparkling all around, and this brilliant object. First you see like a light, and it expands out like a walnut and goes up. This. Yeah. That's actual video. So it's so spectacular. And people go, well, what's going on? What else is going on? I said, people are having experiences in intuition and in consciousness, and our electronics are all talking to. I hope you enjoyed that. So anyway, it's sort of a summary of some of this, just to give you a flavor. Now, the most beautiful contact, and that happened with Bijou, is when you sit in meditation and then you allow them to come within you. So we let them come within our bioelectric field, and we'll take a magnetometer and they'll land in different chakras and start communicating. So I'll allow myself to be given to them, and so I begin to look through their eyes at their world, and they look at our world through my eyes. Now that's a very advanced technique. You can try that at home. Do try this at home. But it gets to the point what I call oneness contact, where you are such in a state of resonant pure-heartedness that the ETs that are there, doesn't matter who they are, big, small, different planets, you connect with one and allow them to enter into where they're actually using your consciousness and neurophysiology to see this world. And then they allow you to see their ship and their world through their consciousness and their eyes. It's beautiful. And so that's a very advanced technique that as a week-long training goes along, I sort of introduce people to. So I think this is then gets into the heart of, in the future, what will life on Earth be like? Well, we're going to have free energy. It's going to come out eventually. I hope in my lifetime, sooner. We'll have anti-gravity, so we'll be going from here to there. Go from here to Paris, take you a couple minutes. We'll have no pollution, no poverty. We won't need a monetary system as we have it today, because there'll be such abundance, you just manifest and materialize what you need. Because once you get into the understanding of higher states of consciousness, we're sort of most of the time in sort of a locked in a linear space-time animal consciousness. Not even animal, that's insulting to the animals. It's sort of blinders on. I love dogs, by the way, because they're so intuitive. And wild animals I love. That we forget that we can actually be awake. And so that was why I was very emotional. I was talking about being in that state of unity consciousness where I was experiencing the unboundedness of the cosmos in mind while being awake within my own little self. That's how all life on Earth should be and will be. So the states of consciousness that we'll develop will be from this sort of waking normal state, normal, whatever that is, into the experience of cosmic consciousness transcendence when in meditation. But as you begin to experience that more and give yourself to it heart and soul, you'll begin to be driving there on the highway or awake, and you'll have that unbounded mind that you'll be subtly and then profoundly in touch with. And then that develops to where you begin to have what's called a God consciousness experience, the next level. But that begins to unfold where you're actually aware of the creator state and how nothingness, the unbounded field of consciousness, becomes matter and space and time. And you begin to see not only this dimension of galaxies in the universe, but the worlds of light and the astral worlds and the other dimensions and the celestial and the angelic. But you also see that same energy within living things, within a plant, an animal. And then you develop a state eventually called unity consciousness, where you actually see that all of this is pure consciousness resonating, phasing as matter, light, photons, plants. And it's not just an intellectualization. You experience it, you feel it, you see it. And then there are many states beyond that. And there's a wonderful Persian saying about all these higher states of consciousness, including the celestial. To each and every one of them, you will, no doubt, attain. All of them. Every one of us. Now, whether it's in this lifetime or in the worlds of light. But the key thing to understand is civilizations that are coming here faster than the speed of light have got to understand a lot of this, because they're dropping out of just materialistic, reductionist, linear thought realm and matter into the crossing point of light. And when you go through the light barrier as a civilization, you are then crossing into the near astral, the astral, and you are very aware of these other dimensions. Now, there are other dimensions that are not material. Now, people have had experiences with all kinds of weird and scary things that are from other dimensions, lower dimensions or higher dimensions. But don't confuse that with ETs. That's where the alien ET confusion comes in. It's been done deliberately. But this interstellar civilizations that are have the ability to go from one star system to another, beyond the speed of light, they have mastered not only these sciences and technologies, but the science of consciousness. Now, they may not all be in a state of perfect enlightenment, but they certainly understand what I'm describing here today in this ballroom in Nevada. And it means that that's what they're waiting for us to develop. Because for the last 100 years, we have had the ability to have a world that's been at peace, with justice, no poverty, free energy, anti-gravity, and going amongst the stars. It's been stopped by people who want to maintain control over us, we the people. And the only way that's going to change, it isn't going to be the President of the United States, although whoever it is, trust me, believe me, as someone would say, we'll get the information to him, or her. In this case, it'll be a him. But that's not where this is going to happen. That's a courtesy. Okay, that's a public service. All of this is public service. But we have to understand that the political class and the ruling class and the elites are so surrounded by interests and by a consciousness of limitation that it's going to take us, everyone in this room, the hundreds of people here and the thousands of people on this webinar, moving as a force in higher consciousness, manifesting that world. Because here's the beautiful thing about that, as Rupert Sheldrake and others have written about, that consciousness is this non-local field. And you can have a group of people meditating or doing something, and it affects people not only on other parts of the planet and other cities, but other galaxies. So as above, so below, and as below, so above. If we understand that what we think and what we do and what our consciousness is will affect the future and manifest the good future, then we have that obligation to manifest that good future within ourselves and with each other. The very worst thing we can do is sit back and expect someone else to do this for us. So this is a call of action for people to not only support disclosure and support the truth and ending secrecy that's illegal and corrupt, but also to embrace what is within each of us, that consciousness that enables us, each of us, doesn't matter who you are and where you live, to be an ambassador from Earth to these people. They are the reason the ETs have responded so clearly every time we've gone out. Isn't because I'm special or anyone in the group is particularly special. It's because everyone on Earth has this potential within them if they give themselves to the ability. And if they give themselves to that capability and actually do it, what happens is that the ETs, they're coming. Now, if you do it, be ready for them to come. But if you're in a state of deep consciousness, then you're not going to be afraid. Now, one of the reasons why I think it's important that the reason that primacy is with consciousness is that if you have an experience like some of these things that have happened on these expeditions with a sort of a normal human consciousness, with all the sort of mythology of fear of the aliens and they're here to eat us from. If you go out to it with those prejudices, the ETs are going to be very aware of that. A, they're not going to come. But B, if they do, you're going to react with fear. So the fear factor is the first thing we have to transcend. And the only way to do that is to have an enlightened understanding of ourselves and our place in the cosmos. And regardless of who's out there, because, it's axiomatic, you can't prove a negative. I can't prove that everything out there is good or bad or this or that. And that's not important. What's important is that we own who we are. We own the fact that this is our planet. We're the children of Earth. We have to embrace the fact that the consciousness within every single one of us, at its base, at its root, is infinite, divine, pure. And if we connect to that, then we can manifest the world of our dreams and the world of the future that's trying to emerge through us, not from outside. It's through us this is emerging. And that world is not only one of free energy and anti-gravity and a material planet that is completely without all the problems that we're currently having, but that is peaceful on this earth, peaceful in the heavens. And this is why we have to have groups of people in meditation and understanding, manifesting that good future. Because if we see it and we practice it, it will come to be. But if we give ourselves to fear, we're opening up endless war, not only on Earth, but in space. And I think now is the time to close what has been called the last yuga, or big cycle in Earth history. It's about 450,000 years. And a lot of people say, well, that was 2012, wasn't that? I said, well, it's a period. And you can't put it to 1 year, but it's this time frame. But time frame in terms of Earth is a long cycle. So the cycle that's trying to emerge now is the age of enlightenment, of universal peace, of interstellar contact, and of unbroken peace for 500,000 years. So the last cycle of 450 or 60,000 years is closing. So if you want to go and stay with that, stay in that consciousness. That's the consciousness of conflict, war, tribalism, alienism, fear. The cycle that's opening is one of universal love, universal peace, abundance, and enlightenment. And so that is the cycle that is opening. But it's not going to, by some Ouija board in the sky, going to happen. It's going to happen through us. And that's the only way that this has ever happened, is from we, the people, manifesting that change. It's very unlikely to happen out of 1600.